Greetings, friend. Do you wish to look as happy as me? Well, you've got the power inside you right now, so use it and send $1 to Best Darn Diddly. You can find us on patreon.com or donate to us directly on PayPal at bestdarndiddly@gmail.com. Don't delay. Eternal happiness is just $1 away.
$1 for eternal happiness and to support one of my favorite podcasts. I'd be happier with $1.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. And this week, we are continuing our conversation that we started last week with Carolyn Omine, Simpsons writer and producer currently and for the last 20 years. Carolyn was so generous with her time, spending over 2 hours talking to us schmoes about this show that we love so much, and we've still got another hour of our conversation and review of fan favorite episode, Cape Fear. So we're going to go ahead and get back to that conversation right now with Carolyn Omine, Richie the WizKidd, and me, MrMostDaysOff. So we get all the way to this part of the episode before it's technically revealed that Sideshow Bob is the one that has been writing these letters to Bart and Blood. It shows him writing, "See you soon, Bart." And then he immediately goes from that to writing a letter to Life in These United States. But as he is writing in his own blood, he does pass out halfway through.
I know.
Get a pen, Sideshow Bob.
Yeah, it's one of those rare times when it's almost the same joke as the list joke, but it's just sort of like a cousin of it. It's like, it's okay. It still works. It's like a different...
It still works, yeah.
You need both of them because it shows that he's been writing in blood this whole time, which leads to him passing out, so it made sense to me.
Yeah.
This does lead into the parole hearing for both Snake and Bob. We cut in and it's immediately on Snake getting his parole approved. And I actually love there's a very sweet little moment between Snake and Bob saying their goodbyes as they'll no longer be cellmates, I guess. And
Go?
And yeah, Bob goes on to say, "Oh, it was such I hope next time we meet, it'll be better times for both of us." And yeah, all we get out of Snake is, "Guh? Buh."
Because you didn't understand the word that Bob used. I forgot to write it down.
It's very flowery. I love, it's funny because I believe this character, it's a controversy only amongst us what we call this character. Because it's, George Meyer created this character, and he called him Jailbird. And then later, somebody else called him Snake. And then I just remember George kind of going, "What? You can't just call him Snake." So he really should be called. I don't know. I'm not going to weigh in. People have different opinions of like what his name should be. So that character, I love his voice, though. I love this. It's such an unusual. I don't know. It's not who you would. It's such a great choice by Hank that he's kind of like a hippie, but he's sort of a valley guy, and it's just such a great idea. I think it's somebody specific from Hank's past. I think I remember him saying.
I had heard that in a director's commentary for one of the previous episodes we'd done that it was somebody that he went to school with.
Yeah, and it's just. I don't know, I don't know why you say, like, be this master criminal. Like, it's a great idea to make it be this valley guy, It's so great.
He's got a wonderful voice, yeah.
He's popping up in a lot of episodes here in a row, just like the Sea Captain did last season, where he popped up in like 4 episodes in a row. But I wanted to ask, how many times has Snake gotten out on parole? Because this has to be a lot by now. I mean, how many times does he have to chew the poo?
He's
so much for 3 strikes.
He's a recidivist. Yeah, he's not trying to change. I think he's not putting his heart into his redemption.
Well, it goes along with
he is who he is. Yeah,
because there's that one episode you guys did. I think I say recent history, but it could have been 10 years ago, where we find out he's the Indiana Jones type earlier in his life, stealing artifacts and whatnot. So I could see where you go from that to coming back and needing more money and robbing people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get your life expectations up that high, and it's the only way to make ends meet.
Yeah. he likes the thrill of it, too. I think.
Yeah.
But he is off. He's free, a free man once again till we see him arrested in whichever episode comes next. But Bob is still on trial, or his parole is still on trial, I should say. He's got some people that are speaking out against him, like Chief Wiggum, who claims that Bob has no decency. He called me Chief Piggum. And then when everybody laughed, he admits, oh, now I get it. But I really love the bit with Selma, because Selma is on the stand and says, he tried to kill me on our honeymoon, but the blue-haired lawyer comes in and says, how many people in this courtroom are thinking of killing her right now? And a few hands go up until he says, be honest. And everybody's hands, I think except for Jasper, was like the only one in the crowd not raising their hand. And even Patty puts her hand up and declares she's always leaving the toilet seat up.
Even the priest even put his hand up.
Yeah.
Was it the priest that nudged the person next to him to put their hand up as well?
No. It was a regular townsperson.
But, yeah, and that's like I wish we could do that joke has so much breathing room. It kind of really does. I think it benefits from that like long pause and come on, and then the slow pan of everybody. It's pretty great.
The last person to go on stand is Bob himself, and he's asked by the blue-haired lawyer, Bob, if you were released, would you pose any threat to one Bart Simpson?
Bart Simpson, huh? The spirited little scamp who twice foiled my evil schemes and sent me to this dank, urine-soaked hellhole.
We object to the term urine-soaked hellhole when you could have said pee-pee-soaked heckhole.
Cheerfully withdrawn.
And what about that tattoo on your chest there that says, die, Bart, die?
It's joke.
Oh, no, that's German. It means thee, Bart, thee.
Oh, well, no one who speaks German could be an evil man. Parole granted.
That's such a great joke. I think that's Conan.
That was Conan. From the
Okay.
commentary, they did, in fact, say that was a Conan joke. And part of the reason it was put into the script is because of his delivery of it was just so good in the reading, or at the reading table, excuse me.
Yeah, the read is very good too. I think that's just the way he put that pause in there. Hey Bart, thee.
And from this point on in the episode, this is where the parody for Cape Fear the movie really, really starts to come into play, because they go through a series of shots that are almost shot for shot from the 92 film. Up until this point in the episode, they'd been using the musical score, or at least a very close rendition of it, to the music that was used in both the 61 and the 92 movie. And that was actually only intended to be used for this episode, but they liked it so much that is still to this day associated with Bob in prison when you guys go to those scenes, from what I understand.
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
That was what I read on the internet. You never know how those things go. I've been called out in the past by dropping some trivia that's been inaccurate, but that's what I read, and I thought that was actually pretty neat.
We did recently. We did a canon Halloween show, and Alf and Greg and Chris Ledesma, they did a really great score, and it was this horror score. It wasn't they wrote a whole different score. But I didn't realize that they were using. I'm sure Alf probably did a version of that thing. He likes to go just slightly different from the thing.
Right. When you hear it, you know it's not the same, but it elicits this mental or emotional response that draws you to whatever. He does a great job with a lot of the music parodies on the show, and this one in particular, though. I watched both the 61 and the 92 movie in the last week or so. I love horror movies anyway. It's October. I was probably going to do it regardless, but with this episode coming up, I knew I wanted to have it fresh in my mind. And the music alone, it will just make you respond, especially when you put, I want to say it's Robert Mitchum in the first movie, and then, of course, Robert De Niro, who is absolutely terrifying in the remake. And when you associate those characters with that music, and then you put that in a way on top of Bob's character, it really does make him seem even more menacing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's great. That movie, and I think you're actually kind of mixing up the years a little bit. It's 62 and 91.
Yeah.
Oh, you are so right. You are so right. Excuse me.
He was testing you and you passed.
Yeah. I believe this is where we would say that a wizard did it. Yeah, they changed that on me.
But no, those are both they're both really great versions of that story. I think that and this is a great episode. I think the lesson we all learn is just do Cape Fear and the Mr. Burns play. So and the music is great. I think Robert Mitchum is also incredibly menacing in a really creepy, scary way, and so funny how in the early one. They never say rape, but they basically, that's what it is. It's like, you know.
Right. They are a little bit, they have to, with it being an older film, they can't be as direct as they were in the 90s, but they still do a really good job of making it this character you are instantly terrified of.
Yeah, and it's so creepy. And then I love that when De Niro doesn't do anything near to what Robert Mitchum did. He's like a whole, he makes this sort of Southern choice, and it actually makes more sense for the name. Katie sounds like a kind of a Southern. I don't know. It's really just both great movies.
So they immediately go into this parody sequence, like I was saying, where they're almost shot for shot sequences of things that happened in the 91 movie specifically. The first one is my favorite. They're in the movie theater, where in the movie, this is the first time that you see Katie. In this case, it's Bob who's smoking a cigar and laughing obnoxiously. And when Marge asks Homer to do something about it, we see him complain, but he's actually smoking a bigger cigar, and he starts laughing even more obnoxiously.
Yeah, he starts to bug Bob.
Oh, that's quite enough already.
Who are the only people in the theater that go and sit directly behind the other person?
I also really like the workout sequence where Bob is doing the weightlifting at first, and he's got all the tattoos, and instead of them being religious themed like they were in the movie, they're all dedicated to the idea of Bart dying, especially the one with his head on a skateboard on his back. That one's particularly dark, but it's all shot for shot until you get him going on like a VHS aerobic video workout, and then it turns into more of the classic Sideshow Bob.
Yeah.
I like the bit inside the movie theater where Marge tells him to stay away, and he's like, "Oh, I'll stay away, all right. I'll stay away forever." He goes, "Wait a minute, that's no good. Wait, Marge, say that line again about staying away from my son." And she just goes, "No."
Yeah, that's like another. It has so much breathing room because he goes, "Oh," and then he leaves, and then he comes back, like you hear, like,
yeah.
And he comes back and is like, "Okay, wait, I thought of something. Now say the thing again." And then she says no, and I think that might be where they get the sound for the rakes for the first time.
I was wondering that too, honestly. Like, it sounded very similar to me.
Wow, yeah.
Says, "No, I'm not going to say it." And then that it's definitely the same sound. I don't think he even knew about the rakes. I think the rakes came up I think he was sort of surprised.
Is that another extend the episode shot?
According to the director's commentary, it very, very much was. In fact, it was originally only one rake, and they just kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it to the point where it started to not be funny. And who was it? It was Sam Simon who suggested just keep adding to it till it's funny again.
Yeah, I think it was Al, and because Al always says it was like just him and the editor. Because Sam wasn't on the show at the time, but I think he did back to rewrite. But he does acknowledge that Sam had told him like that was it was like it was a thing that Sam had said that, you know, if you do something, if you repeat it too much, it won't be funny. But if you repeat it more times, it'll come around again to being funny.
Well, it very much worked in this episode because that rake sequence is easily the most well-known sequence from this episode and constantly ranks in the top 10 whenever various magazines and publications do the funniest Simpsons moments. It's almost always included in those lists.
And the animation there is really great, just as like, he kind of turns, he sort of almost goes out of his way to step on some of them. Like,
Yeah.
and this is Rich Moore, who later went on to be one of the head animators at Rough Draft, which was the animation company that did Futurama, and then Rich he did Wreck-It Ralph, I believe, and I know he just did. Shoot, what was the movie with the animals? I'm gonna look it up.
Secret Life of Pets or Zootopia.
Yeah, Zootopia.
Oh, I love Zootopia. That was really good.
I actually own Zootopia and Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, he was great. He did a great job. The direction in this movie in this sketch is, oh my god, is very, very good.
And he does a great job in this one too. And they did talk also on they didn't actually have the director for this episode in the commentary. He wasn't able to make it for whatever reason, but they did mention how great of a job he did. And they even said that a lot of times it's actually more difficult just to do a direct parody and still make it funny. But they were able to get this great blend with sight gags and just the dialogue with the voice actors, of course, to really bring out some great humor from this fairly dark parody that they were running. Yeah.
It's because you have to kind of choose what parts do you copy exactly in order to make it feel like, what it's supposed to feel like without bogging down the comedy. But I also, the other thing, Futurama was such a good looking show. I mean, besides being funny and smart and all that, it was, the animation in that is so good. And that's all Rich Moore.
Wow. Okay.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we both are
Futurama is another one of our
fans
favorites. Yeah.
Godfellas is one of my favorite episodes of TV history. I love that episode.
Great.
I still cry every single time I watch the episode with the dog, where he's tied outside in front of the store, and that just breaks my heart every single time.
He's tied, is he? He's just sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. He's not even tied. He's just sitting there waiting.
That makes it better that he's not tied.
It makes it even worse, or better or worse, whatever you want to call it. It makes me cry harder. Let's say that.
That's based on a true story. If you ever go to Japan,
you shouldn't have told him that.
And that's going to do it for this week's Best Darn Diddly. I'm going to go cry myself to sleep.
Ever go to Japan in I believe it's the Shibuya train station, there was a dog named Hachiko he used to wait for his owner to come off the train every day. I think the owner was a professor. And when you think about like how short a dog lives, like, so he must have only known the owner for a couple of years because the owner died, but he died at work, so he never came home. And so the dog was waiting for 11 years, and people would started feeding him, and he just became this sort of legend. And if you go to that train station in Japan, you just look up Hachiko. There's a statue for him. There's because their train stations are so big that they have different entrances and exits depending on which street you're coming out of. There is a Hachiko exit and entrance, which is where the dog used to wait. And he was an Akita, kind of a white Akita, and I believe the dog actually ended up dying on that spot. I mean, he would go home after a certain point, but then he'd come back and during the time when what the professor would normally be coming home and just be waiting for him. So he's just the symbol of loyalty. And but yeah, so that episode, that particular part of it was sort of a tribute to Hachiko.
And what would you call the opposite of a fun fact?
Here's a grim fact.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's both incredibly sweet and makes me love dogs even more, and legit will probably make me even sadder the next time I see that episode.
It's sad that he, but the thing is, if you look it up, you'll see that like people, it's great because you know this thing about dogs and how wonderful and loyal dogs are, but that a whole country loves him for it, and people began to notice. They knew what was happening, at the time. So people would give him food, people would pet him. So he actually had a really great life. He wasn't like in Futurama, he was sitting shivering in the snow, but Hachiko was actually sitting there waiting, getting pets and snacks and treats.
That makes it a little bit easier.
Trying to sugarcoat it a little bit.
There you go. A sugar-coated grim fact for you folks. So back to Cape Fear, we have one last parody sequence with the movie sequence. They used a teddy bear tied to strings or fishing line, actually, that was connected to all the doors and windows on the outside of the house. In this case, we have Wiggum using a Krusty the Clown doll, and it's connected to all the doors and windows on the inside of the house, which I thought was really funny. The whole idea is as Wiggum states to Homer, is if once a man is in your home, everything you do to him is nice and legal. Oh, really? Flanders, won't you join me in my kitchen?
I love he starts the animation of him starts smacking his fist after that.
Doesn't work if you invite him.
Idly
hey! Go home.
Idly hey! Toodly doo!
And once again, Homer being kind of an asshole, but in the absolutely most funny of ways.
Yes. And that's perfectly timed animation too there too. Just him like walking in and circling out.
And just being so Flanders about it, like, oh, hi, neighbor. Oh, okay, bye, neighbor. At this point, the Simpsons feel like they have no other choice but to hire someone who might be able to intimidate Bob to go out of town. And we see this man put a gun in his coat and walk out as he lets them know, don't worry, I can be very persuasive. Come on, please. Won't you please leave? Come on, please. And he's just begging Bob at a bar, and Bob's like, no.
It's so funny. It's brilliant Hank character there.
And then we see Bob driving down Evergreen Terrace in an ice cream truck, announcing to the street all of the residents that he will not be trying to kill. And he lists out quite a few people, but of course Bart doesn't make the list. Once again, Homer is completely out of the loop on this, or just fails to notice, because he runs up to Bart saying, "Did you hear the good news, boy?" Oh.
Yeah, I like how Bob is also like Marge Simpson, the little baby Simpson.
Did you notice he named Ned and Maude, but did not name Rod and Todd? What is Bob?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah, he mentions Lisa and the baby, but he doesn't mention Bart. Yeah, but Rod and Todd, that does bug me. I have to say that did bug me.
What did they do to cross Bob?
Well, let's be fair. Rod and Todd can be a bit annoying.
Yeah.
Hey, iron helps them play.
That's right. Always trying to play the Bible study game. Come on, man. You own Monopoly. It's finally gotten to the point, enough is enough. They can't take these threats anymore. The Simpsons are going to be joining the Witness Relocation Program, and they're going to be getting new identities. Homer yells out, "I want to be John Elway!" And immediately starts fantasizing to when he gets to win a big football game.
No, not when. He's down. He scores a touchdown to be down 7-56.
Oh, yeah, you're right. To score in the big game and still get crushed.
I love Bart. I'll be Gus, the lovable chimney sweep. Clean as a whistle, sharp as a thistle, best in all wind semester.
Bart constantly does this little, like, English Cockney accent thing. He does it in a lot of episodes. They really like to go that direction with Bart.
Nancy's really good at pulling that off, too.
She is. She's great.
Bart is a little bit of a dandy every once in a while. It kind of comes out. When he's like, yeah. Like when he's like, I said to Mabel, I said...
I love the list of options that the relocation program has to offer, because the Simpsons can move to places like Cape Fear, or Terror Lake, or Screamville.
New Horrorville, too. Or New Horror Field, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Richie already said earlier, but I love the joke when Homer hears Screamville. He's like, "Ooh, Ice Creamville." No, Screamville. Oh.
Screams. It's one of those things where it's like, you realize, yes, that, why Cape Fear? Why would you go to Cape Fear? You're trying to be safe.
Seems too obvious, I guess, for the bad guys to move there.
Exactly.
They're gonna move to like Pleasantville.
Terror Lake, there's no issue with Terror Lake. But no, the Mr. Thompson bit is my favorite scene from the entire show. I remember this since the first time I ever saw this episode. I remember running into my elementary school telling everybody about it, and they had no idea what I was talking about. But the whole changing the Simpsons to the Thompsons and Homer not being able to recognize when he's supposed to respond with hello when they say, "Hello, Mr. Thompson."
Yeah, again, another bit that's been so allowed to breathe, of just like him. Like that. What's funny about that is how long Homer just doesn't look at him, and then he's like, "Okay, let's try it again." And then they dissolve to later, and he's like, "Okay, when I stomp on your foot," and then he's like, "I think he's talking to you."
That line is so perfectly delivered in that scene. Like the little whisper, is so great.
Yeah, Homer's loud whisper. It's so great.
Dan does that really well. Dan Castellaneta hits that talking under his breath as Homer. He's got that so perfected.
I love that his family, like, they look like they've been there a while, but it doesn't seem like it's anything they haven't seen before. They're just trying to kill time. But the two agents look so beat down. Like, I just love that little dynamic right there.
Yeah, they're just like, "Okay, let's try it again."
Another great sequence with Homer specifically, and the rest of the family as well. They're officially the Thompsons now, and they hit the road for their new life. But it's quickly revealed that they actually have Bob stowed away under the car, again, very much like the movie where Robert De Niro does that. Only in this case, as they're driving, it goes a lot worse for Bob than it did Bob De Niro, Sideshow Bob than it did Bob De Niro, because they hit speed bumps along the way, and then Homer is like taking a drink of coffee. "Oh, this is far too hot to drink." Throws it over the side, and of course it splashes Bob in the face. And the absolute best, "Hey kids, you want to drive through that cactus patch?"
Yeah. No.
Well, 2 against 1.
I love that Homer doesn't slow down through any of those speed bumps. He's just going straight through them the whole time.
I guess he thought he was driving the Canyonero. It can handle those things. I like that they actually do the Thompsons all the way through, complete with couch gag, where they run into their new boat home, I guess you would say. Houseboat, I guess, whatever. They do the couch gag where all the fish come crumbling down on top of them. And then they start talking about their new living situation, and they point out, the best thing about moving into a houseboat is if you don't like your neighbors, you can just pull anchor and leave. And literally all of their neighbors do just that.
Yeah. They laugh or something? They do something sort of annoying for a few seconds too.
I think they just like joyfully laugh, but like kind of annoying, like you said, yeah. And then they immediately pull out. I love Homer's shirt. Did you see Homer's shirt?
Yeah.
It actually said Witness Relocation Program on it.
And his hat, WRP on his hat too.
Oh, that's so great.
Way to give it away.
This was right where that sequence we talked about earlier with all the Bob hitting rakes again and again and again and again after he just went through the speed bumps and the hot coffee and the cactus patch. So things are really going poorly for him. As you mentioned, Homer is decked out in his Witness Relocation Program clothing, and he's pretty much ready to start chilling, drinking beer, and enjoying his new life. But Marge is super worried. Homer reassures her, though, "I took care of everything. Back home, we're all set, and I even tied the dog up out back," where we see Santa's little helper swimming in circles as he's tied to a post in the water. And even worse, Abe Simpson is back home beating on the Simpsons' door, saying his pills are locked inside. I'm sure nothing will go wrong with that.
Yeah, and I love that I'm glad that they took their dogs and cats with them on their witness protection program.
Yeah, that's important. I agree.
I wondered if they had to give the dog and cat different names. They probably
Snowball 3, maybe?
That's a good one.
No one will ever figure that one out.
And Satan's little helper.
Nice.
It's almost as good as Brian Scully being the to the witness protection program. He'd be Brian Scully.
Come on, you can do better than that. So it's like 2/3 of the way through the episode now. We're about to get into the third act, and this is the first time that Bob actually confronts Bart in the episode. But he's not actually threatening him. He's just laying in the middle of this public street. And after all, what harm could possibly come from that?
Marching arm.
Just then, a parade, specifically the Terror Lake salutes Hannibal crossing the Alps, which each individual word gets its own elephant, including the word "and," which is absolutely brilliant, as they all crush Bob.
But it's clever because it's actually done with elephants, like Hannibal crossing the Alps, so...
It's a really, really deep cut joke, kind of obscure in a weird way, because it's referencing the Second Punic War in 218 BC, which I totally didn't have to Google. I just knew that off the top of my head.
This is another moment of, like, it's like, how short was this episode? That they take the time for each elephant, and including the word "the." They just stomp on it. I love that. Yeah.
While Bob's being trampled, Bart uses this opportunity to run back and tell his parents that Bob has found them, and Homer, who has just literally cracked a beer and was sitting in silence, yells at his son to not interrupt. Marge is like, "Homer, this is important." "Oh, no, it isn't."
Yeah, that's all he has.
By the way, Miles, Bart getting elephants to trample Sideshow Bob. Bart is clearly a Beastmaster. I'm going to keep throwing that out there. Why else would they conveniently walk right over his body? Carolyn, I've been pointing out that we have Magical Maggie. I think each of the Simpsons has like an unknown superpower. And that Bart's clearly a Beastmaster because he always has the animal episodes around him. So yeah. I think he meant that to happen.
One of my favorite animal moments, it has to do with Bart. Matt Groening has certain notes that he likes to give a lot, and one sort of pet peeve he has is he doesn't like animals to act not like animals, except for, Itchy and Scratchy. He doesn't want them to be cartoon animals. He always wants them to act as animals act. And then, of course, so because he's always pushing that, sometimes, people test that boundary. One of my favorite moments is, I can't remember because I wasn't on the show at the time, but it was like, I think it's when Bart it's either when he gets the elephant or when he gets the fancy collie. But the dogs the Sam's Little Helper and Snowball too are so jealous that they're trying to do tricks. So they're on their hind legs.
Yes.
Bart kind of just walks away and then they go, yeah, it's sort of believable. Like they have the dolphin that they're so desperate they might actually learn to talk. Just try to get his attention.
They think they're people.
Yeah. Adorable.
It's so sad too. Everything's funny.
The pets don't always do so well in the Simpsons universe, unfortunately. Sometimes they're a bit neglected. So, Bob is at the Bates Motel, how appropriate, planning his revenge on Bart, and meanwhile, Homer is back at the boathouse, and he's making some interesting choices on how he's choosing to comfort his son. He comes in wielding a very, very big knife, and is like, "Hey boy, do you want one of these brownies I just made?" Bart, of course, is like, "Dad, I'm a little on edge. Could you please stop running into my room wielding a knife?" "Oh, of course, of course." "Hey, Bart, do you want to see my new chainsaw and hockey mask?"
And again, lines like that, I wonder how many takes they take to get him just like that, because Dan says that so fast, but like you can hear every word, and it sounds perfect. We've been saying this for 5 seasons now. It amazes me going back and watching these and actually notating on them how beautifully each line is even said, and it makes you just wonder, this has to take so much work and effort. But like even that quick little bit, I just love it.
Yeah, no, they do like Dan will just go for it with the most emotion and funniness. And then every once in a while we kind of go, okay, we're kind of missing this word, or we're kind of not able to hear this word. And then he'll just, you just have to kind of give him that reminder sometimes. And he'll just do it the same way with the same speed, same, emphasis and just a little clearer. It's really amazing. Yeah. Harry's also really good at cause we often have him doing those fast talking, like on drug companies at the end, they have a little list of side effects and
yeah,
he can do those super fast and just keep them all enunciated. But yeah, we do have to listen. Sometimes too, you listen again because sometimes it's an unusual thought. So you have to be very clear. You have to hit it extra hard because some things are easy, but my chainsaw and hockey mask is you probably have to make sure you really get that nice and crisp and clear because they wouldn't get it. But yeah, you have to kind of anytime the audience has to work even the tiniest bit to figure out what you meant is it takes away from the funniness of the joke. It's always kind of I don't know. It's like removing an obstacle to let the river flow, kind of, So the more,
that makes sense.
Clear you can make anything. So we always go for the clearest way. And so, yeah, that's a good observation because it is hard to do somebody running in, shouting something but absolutely clear. And, we don't always get it right away, but we are all watching for it and we will always eventually get it. And, but yeah, it's primo importance to be completely clear.
It's been working for 29 seasons so far.
True story. And I think this is another great moment where the animation and the voice actors work really well together because the animation is actually very chaotic and sporadic as well as what Homer is saying. So they kind of tie in hand, and it really makes this joke even work better than it would, I think, because you're totally right. It's very crisp, and it's actually quite impressive that they can actually pull that line off at all and then combine it with the animation. And that is one of the most memorable moments in the show. For me, again, being a big horror fan, that's, Jason Voorhees is one of my favorites of all times. And that's one of my favorite images to use on Twitter is, various memes and things of that nature.
Yeah. And a chainsaw, over a chainsaw sound effect that voice that still rings out clear.
Yeah, and it even sounds like his voice was behind a hockey mask in a way, too.
Yes, they do. They do have a little, there's a little process on its voice to sound.
Oh, interesting.
But Dan will sometimes he will cover his mouth and then we'll usually do a take without it then we always have the choice of sometimes we actually live, he'll muffled, sometimes he'll just muffle putting his hands over, or we'll say, now we'll do one without it and we'll see if we electronically do it, which way sounds better. I'm not sure which way it ended up with this one. But Dan is also very good at, Dan is such a brilliant voice actor. He's just a brilliant actor, but he's in particular, he always, if Homer's eating something, he'll go out into the snack room and figure out, so it's supposed to be chips. Okay, well, we got carrots. He's very particular what kind of, it's almost like Foley. What's he going to be crunching on or drinking? It's, he's so patient.
It's cool that he does that in the moment, though. That's actually really neat that he does his own foliage in a way.
A lot of times, yeah. A lot of times, and then, we do fix some things, but, we did a lot of things there. He's very thoughtful and always kind of trying to come up with, he's just wonderful to work with.
So Bart is absolutely wired at this point, as you might expect, and unfortunately, when he finally does actually get to sleep, this is the moment when Bob arrives at the houseboat, and of course is greeted by one last rake, which was absolutely brilliant. He cuts the rope, and they take off downriver, and he goes to Bart's room, where Bart immediately screams and starts to flee. He notices that his family's been tied up, and Homer's even been drugged.
No, he's not drugged.
Marge is like, no, he hasn't. So disappointed.
They tied up the cat and the dog.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob probably took him out of the water, so he did Santa's little helper. Little helper a service.
Yeah, maybe the dog tied himself up swimming around that pole, and Bob just picked him up
Yoink.
and put him on the boat deck.
Untied him from the pole and tied him up on the boat.
Bart runs to the front of the boat where he's greeted by an alligator. So he flees to the back of the boat where there's a series of electric eels. And he runs back to the front and sees the alligator again and is like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, another great delivered line right there. Just the way he says it, where you truly believe he forgot for 5 seconds.
Yeah. He has a very short attention span from all the television he watches, as we know from previous episodes.
Or the fleeing for his life.
One of those. But once again, when he comes face to face with Bob, Bart uses something that I like to think that he learned from Lyle Landley back in the monorail episode. He's asked, do you have any last requests? And Bart gives him the old, well, there is one thing. Nah. No, tell me, what is it? Well, I would like to hear the entire score of the HMS Pinafore. Fine, Bart, I shall send you to heaven before I send you to hell.
Hell.
This entire sequence is fantastic because throughout the performance, Bart is sitting back and at one point he's eating popcorn. He actually has a playbill that has Bob's face on it. And there's even a giant British flag that drops as the backdrop during the big finale sequence.
He joins them for part of the song, too.
Oh, yeah, he does. You're right. They sing a little duet. There's a fun fact on the commentary from this portion where Matt Groening was actually in the room with Al Jean on. I'm blanking on who else they said it was other writers as well, but Al Jean was the runner at this point, and they were pitching this concept with the popcorn and the playbill and the flag. And Matt Groening had to leave at this point, but he left chuckling, thinking, "Oh, it's getting late. The writers are getting giddy," and thought, "There's no way they're actually going to include that in the final product." And it wasn't until much later that he realized, oh, wow, no, that was actually part of the final product.
And I like that they sort of buy it by, like, the family's singing those songs, right, as they're driving. So you kind of imagine that, okay, maybe Bart got it in his head, like as they're driving.
That's yeah.
Like Bob's underneath and they're playing. Let's play so they play the soundtrack early on.
That's
a really
good callback.
Point.
Yeah, I didn't actually connect that in my head. That's a really, really good point. That's why we have you on the show, Carolyn. Thank you so much. So this all ends, of course. Bart had fooled Bob. He saw the sign that they were, I think it was, 15 miles from Springfield, and they were flowing upriver. They actually crash right at the finale when Bob finishes and grabs Bart with his knife and says, "And now, Bart, it's time for the final cut." And he's immediately thrown against the boat railing, and it just so happens the boat crashed right outside of the Springfield brothel, where all 3 cops are currently in bathrobes, but on the scene to take Bob in.
Hold it right there, Sideshow Bob. You're under arrest by Lucifer's beard. Sorry,
One last fun fact. No, that's a great line. One last fun fact from the commentary on this sequence. So this part right here, the whole thing with the brothel and the ending here was actually needed to go through rewrites. But as I mentioned earlier, this show is a holdover from season 4. And by the time they got it back for rewrites, most of the staff was actually gone. So Al Jean got to borrow the writers from David Merkin, the showrunner that had taken over for a morning, and this is one of the few episodes that actually has a combined effort of multiple writing teams at least taking some small part in the creation of this episode.
I think it's interesting because I don't know how brothels work, but I didn't know they provided bathrobes.
Maybe
those aren't free. I'm certain. Yeah.
They don't look like spa bathrobes either. They look like maybe they look like they brought them from home almost. Like they're like kind of.
Well, isn't Wiggum's pink? Like, did he accidentally grab his wife's by mistake?
Why was his wife at a brothel?
His wife's at the brothel. I think that's sweet that you think he was with his wife at the brothel.
I meant from home was what I was referring to, but yeah, either way, hey, couple's got to keep things fresh. It's cool.
Yeah, I think that might belong to his girlfriend at the brothel.
Ah, okay, that makes sense too. I unfortunately also don't know how brothels work. So
I really like the little part with Bart where he said, "Take him away, boys," and Wiggum says, "Hey, I'm the chief here. Bake him away, toys."
What'd you say, Chief? Do what the kid said.
That's so cute.
And as usual, we have a very late Simpsons reset. We get the Simpsons reset like we normally do. In this case, literally in just the last few seconds of the show, the Simpsons return to their home with Bob in prison, and everything seems right in the world again. Except for Grandpa, who we mentioned earlier did not have his pills, and it turns out that must have been some sort of hormone treatment, I'm guessing, because Abe has developed a full head of very long feminine hair and breasts, and he's at least caught the eye of one gentleman as Jasper decides that he'd like to take her to a concert.
I guess that was the writer's subtle way of letting us all know that Grandpa is a trans man. That unless he takes his male hormones, he reverts back to a woman. Right? Because he's not taking pills to be a woman. He's taking pills to keep from being.
Keep from being a woman. Yeah.
This is about the fourth time in the last 10 episodes that we've had a reference to Grandpa in drag, so to speak. So maybe he just went home and switched clothes to come back because he's losing his mind because he didn't take his pills. But cross-dressing Grandpa is a very big deal for the last few episodes on this show.
It was a running gag throughout season 4 for certain.
And then later, in a fairly recent episode, I want to say like a couple of years ago, when I was probably longer than that, like maybe like 5 years. Time is crazy. Grandpa, a lot of that was explained because Grandpa was a wrestler, like a Gorgeous George wrestler. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I need to go look that one up. I've missed that one, but I'm a big wrestling fan, so actually I need to go look that up for sure.
But yeah, that I think that whole ending, I don't know for sure, but I think it is a little bit of an homage to the end of Some Like It Hot. Is that the one where Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis are dressed like women?
I believe that is the case. I'll be honest, I have not seen that film, but that is one of my wife's favorites. So I've at least seen it on several times, and I do believe that is the correct film you're thinking of.
Yeah, it's a good one. And then at the end, because there's this one dude who's been sort of flirting with, I think it's the Jack Lemmon character the whole time as a woman, and then finally, like, I think at the end of the movie, they're driving away in a car, and then he's like, dude, look, I got to tell you something. I'm a man. And then the guy just is driving. He goes, well, nobody's perfect. And then
they hit the reset, though. Yeah,
I like how they alluded that, too, because, Abe is like, there's something I need to tell you. Oh, well, I've got these concert tickets. Oh, never mind.
I mean, who is it, too? It's somebody weird, like...
I had written down, who was it?
Mac Davis? No.
Let's see. It was, assuming I can read my own handwriting would be the thing. Stephen Gaddy? Stephen Gaddy? I don't know.
Oh, Stephen Gaddy.
Yeah.
I don't know who it is. No, I feel like Stephen Eady.
Edie.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I often have to have my own handwriting translated for me.
Yeah, Stephen Eady. That's right.
Well, that does bring us to the end of the episode Cape Fear. Carolyn, was there anything else that you would like to add that we missed covering this episode?
I feel like I wanted to say more about Kelsey and how great he is. He really is just so funny, and his voice is so mellifluous. It really is, just because we hear voices. I mean, all of our actors' voices are really great, but he really does. Just his speaking voice is so rich, and he's really nice to direct. He's one of the few people, like, when you give him a direction, sometimes he'll go, "Oh, very nice." Like, he will, like, compliment you on your direction, which is very sweet and nice. And then, he sings beautifully, and he's just really, really, really funny. And so, yeah, we love having him.
He always hits. Every one of his episodes are absolutely great. There's some that did not appreciate the episode where he tries to murder Selma on their honeymoon, the last Sideshow Bob episode we did. And to some extent, that's because they, at least from a story that I read from Al Jean, that sometimes with with that episode specifically, it was very hard to find humor because they had to keep it a mystery. Versus this episode, there was no mystery really from the get-go. You knew it was Bob, you knew he was after Bart, and that really opened up the doors for them to be able to explore more comedic avenues than having to try to set up all these clues and then go and revisit them at the end to kind of point out like, hey, see, we showed you all that you needed to know. And it's harder to work with comedy from that aspect is what I read.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think too sometimes, and it's just a thing too, though, like, it is one of those things where it's hard to, it's not as funny for some reason you don't, on some level, believe that Bob is ever going to hurt Bart. And then, but there is sometimes when you have a male character hurting a female character, it just sort of hits this other part. Or I don't even know. I remember there was an episode I pitched much later, and I had originally pitched it that it was that Homer gets mugged, and that makes him agoraphobic. And it eventually turned into being Marge, and it became a really serious moment in the show. And I just thought that was so interesting because in my mind, when you think about Homer being mugged, it's hilarious, you know? It's like, oh, like he's going to be, but then you think of Marge being mugged and it's like, ooh.
Yeah, that changes the comedy a lot, especially just with Dan Castellaneta's like screaming that you can already envision him doing when the mugger shows up. Essentially, he's going to start doing those very expressive Homer screams, and I think there'd be a lot of comedy in that. Whereas Julie Kavner does a great job as Marge, but I just feel like there would be it would not have the same comedic effect at all.
Yeah, and it might not even be a gender thing. It might even be that Marge is just a more realistic character than Homer is more, is more.
And she's also far smarter than a dog in many cases. So.
Yeah. Yeah, she's more human. And I'm not sure. I guess with Selma, I don't know. I thought that episode was good, but I could see. I think also there was that element in that episode too, where you kind of feel sorry for Selma, like you kind of want the marriage to go away. I don't know. She's sort of lonely, right?
Oh, she's a very sympathetic character, and a lot of her story we haven't even gotten to yet because I know that she'll actually officially come out of the closet somewhere, I believe, in season 12, if I remember right. Again, we're not going to make any judgments on any episodes when we get to them, but we do know that that's going to become a bigger part of her character, and already on just the episodes that we've examined, there's clearly some storylines where I think they already know that she is a lesbian and she's struggling with her gender identity or her sexual orientation early on in the show.
It's not Selma though. It's
Patty.
I always do that. I'm sorry. I gotta have if I don't have the earrings on and I can't see them, then I get them confused. You gotta have the little curvy ones are for Selma, and I believe it's triangles or circles for Patty's.
It's like the two bumps. Horizontal hair is Selma, and then the one bump, kind of more vertical hairdo is Selma.
If that's the dumbest thing I say today, I'll call it a good day.
Yeah. Selma got married all those times. She's got many last names. Patty never, other than her, she kind of lusts after MacGyver, but other than that, she never really looked for a dude. She was probably always looking for a lady.
That makes sense.
The voices of the two voices, there is no difference. Julie doesn't do a different voice for one or the other. They're the same.
And yeah, there are character elements that are different. Just a little subtle things, I think, sometimes that we've noticed where I believe it's Patty will be just a little bit more masculine than Selma at times, just because, to your point, Selma does openly search for relationships throughout the series.
Yeah. I mean, Selma's not super feminine either.
No, just a touch more than Patty.
I mean, she leaves the toilet seat up, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is she doing that?
Yeah, I know. Brings up a whole other slew of questions.
So, Richie, what about you or that book of yours? Is there anything else you'd like to point out on Cape Fear?
Well, my usual go-to here with The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family. We touched on everything in there. There was very few notes on this one. But the biggest thing I wrote down at the end of this episode, Carolyn just kind of touched on it, is I wanted to propose the question that does Sideshow Bob need Bart the way that evil needs good? Like I'm proposing that without Bart, is Bob ever truly going to be living? Because he has him in his clutches numerous times throughout the series, starting with this episode really in particular. And I touching on what Carolyn said, I think he purposely gives Bart an out almost. He wants Bart to topple him in the last moments. I don't think he ever wants this line to end, because if so, what is he doing with his life?
Seems like one of the things that's covered in one of those Simpsons philosophy courses. I wonder if that's ever been brought up.
There's actually been a couple episodes, and maybe they haven't come out yet.
Uh-oh.
I know.
Oh, inside information here.
Yeah.
I know the most recent one, it's about that. And I feel like we sort of talked about it before. Wait. Oh, wait, you know what? I'm not even gonna, it might be, the Halloween episode. But yes, we do, that is, yeah. Why does he always, part of it, you think he's just so easy to trick because of his ego. He often gets, sidetracked, like a lot of Batman villains used to get sidetracked. Monologue too long and with
their own brilliance.
Yeah, but I there is that question of like, would he be unhappy if he didn't have Bart
or Rakes?
Yeah. I'm so, it's weird because so many these shows, where we do them a year in advance and then they air, and I'm often not sure what has aired or not, but I think it might have actually aired. It feels like it was a while ago. There was a few. I actually had done there was a Itchy and Scratchy that was similar, where it was, I'm trying to remember what episode it was, but there's a Itchy and Scratchy where Itchy kills Scratchy, and in it he's sad that he's killed Scratchy, and so he builds this cloning machine. And so then he has this thing where like these clones of Scratchy are coming out, and then he's like killing each clone.
Yeah.
This is so tiring. So then he builds a killing machine. You can just sit back and watch the clones get killed.
Itchy might be the smartest character of all.
Well, Carolyn, we really appreciate you joining us today on the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people connect with you online?
I'm on Twitter under Carolyn Omine, and I'm on Instagram. It's Carolyn Omine with an OHMINE.
Mine, got it. Well, again, we really appreciate you being on the show today. It was an absolute blast getting to talk with you about one of our favorite shows of all time and getting to talk with somebody who's so closely related with the show. We really hope that we'll be able to get you to come back again in the future, especially when we get to the episode that you first wrote. That, I think, would be a lot of fun to have you come back and dissect that one with us if you're interested.
I would love to do that.
Awesome.
That'll be a lot of fun. So again, thank you very much. As far as us, you can follow me at MrMostDaysOff. You can follow Richie at TheWiz_Kid23, and of course, you can follow at Best Darn Diddly and find everything related to our show at bestdarndiddly.com. The WizKidd and I will be back again next week for the Conan written episode, Homer Goes to College.
Yay!
I think he's talking to you.
Until next time, be cromulent to each other.
Good evening, future passengers. Are you ready to sit back, relax, and join us on a ride of epic proportions through the mystical land of randomness?
Am I a serial killer if I eat Lucky Charms?
What would it be like if horror characters ran a gym? Who would run spin class?
When a shark jumps out of the water, is it like suffocating for that split second?
So join us every week for a brand new Derailment with Goobs, Ripkin, and Jenny Bean.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Derailers.
And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and also on YouTube. Have a great night or day, folks.